NATO's former Deputy Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, that's the former British Army officer Sir Richard Shirreff, has said this morning that Donald Trump has left Britain with simply no choice but to plan for conscription.
But adults in Gen Z, that's 18 to 27-year-olds, seem reluctant to be part of the efforts, with a recent YouGov poll finding only 11% would fight for Britain. We asked some of them for their thoughts on joining the front line.
I'm not trained. I can't even walk up the stairs.
Yeah. If it was mandatory, obviously I'd go.
I mean, the fact that you can die for your country before you can vote, there's no incentive for young people to participate.
I don't think I'd be very useful.
It's just not my vibe.
Yeah, I probably would. Come from a family of people that have served in the Royal Air Force and Army as well.
I don't think I have a good enough reason to want to give back to this country in that sense.
Just doesn't seem like something I would enjoy.
But is the matter kind of out of our hands? Is it actually time, perforce, to make national service mandatory? Former Defence Minister and Army Captain Tobias Ellwood served in Northern Ireland and Cyprus, Kuwait and Bosnia, and he says that we simply have no option but to make national service mandatory. But senior lecturer in sociology, Dr Lisa McKenzie here, says that forcing somebody to do anything never works, and that includes conscription. All right, well, let's come to you first, Tobias, Mr Ellwood. Do you feel that the time for debate has actually passed? Is that what you're saying? That it's not really a question of opinion now, it's simply a matter of we have to get boots on the ground and therefore we have to have conscription?
Yes, I mean, that's the backdrop to this, is that we've entered a new era of insecurity. Our world is getting more dangerous, not less. Russia's aggression is rising. It's increasingly backed by China. The United States is actually dialing back from its interests in Europe, and we are increasingly vulnerable, and we must prepare. There's been a big debate about increasing defence spending to 2.5%. We can't afford to keep a large standing army. So this is all about increasing our national readiness, this latent capability that we can tap into at any time. And yes, it would be Army, Air Force or Navy, but that isn't for everybody. We need skill sets in, for example, our Coast Guards, our ambulance, our defence industry, for example, and specifically in the digital world, cybersecurity experts, air traffic controllers, AI and so on. So it's an all-of-society approach. And Finland is where they're already doing this, a very small country, just 5 million. They have an armed force of about 30,000. If mobilised, it can swell to 300,000 in a time of crisis. And that's a real deterrent. And that's actually what's helped them hold that line against Russia. So this is the bigger picture that we need to face. What happens if we don't do this? What are the consequences then?
OK, Dr Lisa McKenzie, let's come to you in that case. I mean, you know, Tobias Ellwood pointing out there, we're at a critical time. We need all of society to do their bit for our own good.
But we are asking that of an extremely divided society. And I think there are two things here. Tobias mentioned Finland. Well, Finland's probably, you know, it's a smaller country and they've probably got an identity, a national identity that wants to sort of protect and preserve its country. We've got to be realistic and honest here. We've got an extremely divided society. And whether our young people, they've already said that they don't think that their stake in the country is as such where they would want to go and fight. And although, yes, there'll be jobs in technology and AI, ultimately, you are saying that you could give your life. You know, ultimately, as we've seen in many, many wars previously, that young men and women come back in coffins, draped in the Union Jack.
But we've been here before. I'm just looking at my history book here. In 1933, there was the famous debate at the Oxford Union on the motion, this House will under no circumstances fight for king and country, and it passed with an overwhelming majority. Yeah. 6 years later, the students making that debate were in khaki and fighting for their king and country.
Yeah, perhaps not all of them, because one of the things about this is that it's unevenly spread. If you have a look at who the British Army is now and the military is now, it's overwhelmingly white working class boys. And that's, for me, that's probably the problem here, is that the people that are expected to go and fight, the people who are expected to go and be patriotic and do their duty are always the same people, because, you know, will there be caveats? Will people who are pacifists, will they be able to step back?
Well, let's ask Mr Ellwood that. Would there be, or would national service basically be colour blind and ethnicity blind and culture blind?
Well, you'd want the nation to step forward because also it wants to step forward. And you're right, that there's an attitude at the moment that this doesn't really concern us. But we need to protect ourselves and our interests. War is heading our way. And you're right to make reference to that historical debate back in 1933. I participated in an anniversary of the same debate 90 years later. Hitler apparently looked at the result of that debate in 1933, saying this House will not fight for king and country, saying the Brits are not up for it. That's why he was going to attack. When it push came to the shove, by 1938, 1939, there was a recognition that we had no choice. And it really concerns me, the deals that have been struck with around Ukraine right now, that we are heading in the same direction, that history is repeating itself.
Practicalities, what would be the age group of people being called up and how long will they have to serve for?
Well, the Finnish model, a lot of detail here to be discussed, but it's the concept that needs to be recognised. The Finnish model is that you do 8 months at the age of 18, and then you keep that latent capability. You do a couple of weeks top up every single year, and there is that national competence that is then there. But you also see in Finland that there's a sense of fostering a unity, a national pride, a sense of civic duty that did grow. There's always going to be pushback in something as huge as this. We've had it relatively easy for the last 3 decades. As I stressed, we moved into a new era of insecurity, and we must get our head around that.
OK, we will have to leave it there. Tobias, Ellwood, Dr Lisa McKenzie, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We did ask you if it's time to make national service mandatory. Let's take a look at those results. 30% of you said yes, 70% of you said no. It's an interesting one.
That pretty much mirrors the vote in 1933, actually.
Yeah,
that's
and
almost exactly the same split.
That sort of those higher up in the armed forces might be a bit worried about trying to manage and, you know, look after...
A reluctant army.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But anyway, we will see.
Anyway, we've had the debate. That's your view at the moment. I bet that might change, though.